Welcome back to iGen Politics. This is a podcast that makes politics engaging and relevant for all generations. My name is Victor Shi. I'm currently a sophomore at UCLA, was elected as the youngest delegate for Joe Biden, and am one of the co-hosts of this podcast.
And I'm Jill Wine-Banks, the author of The Watergate Girl, based on my experience as an assistant Watergate prosecutor in the trial and tapes hearing. I'm also an MSNBC legal analyst and the wearer of #Jill's Pins. Today's pin is a Liberty Bell, which is in honor of the Protecting Our Democracy Act, which our guest is sponsoring. And having prosecuted Richard Nixon and his top aides, naming him an unindicted co-conspirator, I have long been aware of what it looks like when a president tests and stretches the powers of the executive branch well beyond the limits our constitutional framework sets, and what we and our founders expected, breaking from all historic norms. After Watergate, Congress took action. They passed a series of legislation to correct the flaws that they saw, and unfortunately, many of the most important, including the campaign finance reforms, have been undone by the Supreme Court. And so that's too bad. But right now, I can see how very much with Donald Trump, things are even worse than they were during Watergate. And we have an extreme and unprecedented episode before us. The wrongdoings by him, his children, his lawyers, his aides, his attorney general, his cabinet officers, his supporters in Congress, including ignoring all subpoenas and any oversight requests, have been egregious. They have violated the Hatch Act, the Emoluments Clause, they have lied. And so it's once again essential for Congress to codify the very norms that we always expected to be followed and that didn't even need to be legislated. And luckily for us, we have with us a guest who has proposed legislation that would get to the norms that are no longer working and that will be codified under this bill.
Congressman Adam Schiff is with us today. He is the lead sponsor for the Protecting Our Democracy Act that would do exactly that, codify norms we never expected to be ignored. This act is a sweeping package of reforms that would strengthen America's democracy institutions against future presidents, regardless of political party, who seek to abuse power for their office for corrupt purposes. Congressman Adam Schiff represents California's 28th Congressional District in his 11th term in the House of Representatives. Schiff currently serves as the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which oversees the nation's intelligence agencies, and was a leader of the first impeachment of Donald J. Trump. Schiff is currently on a leave of absence from the House Appropriations Committee, where he remains an ex officio member. Welcome back, Congressman, and thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, and we're very much looking forward to talking to you about this much-needed legislation. But before we get to that, there's one extremely important piece of legislation that I have to ask you about, because I just heard Representative Karen Bass saying that it looked like the George Floyd legislation was going to have to be done by executive order. And the other thing is, of course, what's happening with the government shutdown and whether there's any way to avoid that. So at the very moment that we're talking, I know people are negotiating, so you can't give me a firm and final answer, but if you can, just tell me, Republicans seem very unified, the Democrats seem to be fighting at least about the budget. How likely is a shutdown?
Well, I think a shutdown is still very unlikely. And I realize that if you're betting against Congress, you would generally win. But it would be so irresponsible to shut down the government. And I think we're going to just have to find a way to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, the Republicans are being deeply irresponsible. They helped run up, significant bills, and now they're not willing to pay them, which is what the debt limit is about. Periodically, the government has to raise the debt ceiling to respond to debts it's already taken on. And we took on about $2 trillion worth of debt when the Republicans gave a $2 trillion tax cut. They supported, as we did, relief during the pandemic. That added to our fiscal burden as well, but we need to be responsible. We need to pay it. And Republicans have traditionally voted for those increases in the debt limit when they were in the majority, and now they're abdicating that responsibility. But at the same time, I just can't imagine they would be so reckless as to lead us into a shutdown. So I think we'll get it done. And on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, it's a terrible tragedy that we can't get the Republicans to support meaningful reform. And that's really the obstacle. Karen Bass has negotiated in good faith and negotiated for weeks and months. But at the end of the day, we can't accept a bill that isn't meaningful, that's just essentially superficial. And so we will need to do what we can on our own, and we will need to do what we can through executive order, because the policy needs to be changed. We do need accountability, and it's a shame we don't have a good partner in the GOP.
Absolutely. And if last summer, a year ago, showed us anything, it's the need for that police reform. And I'm hoping that you're right, and let's remain positive on both of those things.
So thank you for that. Let's move on to your bill on democracy. One of the top line components of the bill include combating refusals to respond to oversight subpoenas, preventing spending or secretly freezing funds, contrary to congressional obligations, barring firing inspectors general or retaliating against whistleblowers, and creating penalties for taking emoluments or paying prohibited in the Constitution while including from commercial transactions. And I think there's really one overarching theme in all of the components, which is limiting executive power. Are there any provisions that you want to mention to our audience that we didn't mention that short introduction?
You covered a lot of the main ones. And what happened is that over the last 4 years, we've learned that many of the guardrails of our democracy were established by norm. And we thought those norms could not be violated. But it turns out you can violate them. And you can violate them with impunity under one condition, and that is that one of the major parties gives itself over so completely to the president that it will allow the president to trample other institutions of government without response. And so we would expedite the enforcement of congressional subpoenas, prevent abuse of the pardon power, give an enforcement mechanism to the emoluments clause that prohibits a president from enriching themselves, protect whistleblowers, inspector generals, strengthen the independence of the Justice Department. It also deals with other problems that we discovered, like when somebody wins an election and the other side refuses to concede, and there is an official within the Office of Management and Budget who needs to make a ascertainment of the winner in order to allow the transition to go forward. It's supposed to be a purely ministerial act, but there was so much pressure put on this bureaucrat that she didn't, and it held up the Biden transition. So we addressed that as well as other problems that we've discovered over the last 4 years.
So President Trump has been out of office for months now. Can you talk about the timing of this bill and if there's a particular reason why you're introducing the bill now?
We actually introduced a very similar package last year. But while Trump was in office, the Republicans were not willing to support even ideas that they had supported in the past. Some of the provisions of this bill had been sponsored by Republicans in the past. But as long as Trump was in office and had the power to punish them, they were too scared, too intimidated to support it. It's my hope that now that he's out of office, they'll show a little bit more courage, a little bit more devotion to the Constitution. But the fear of the past president is still very powerful. He still goes after his enemies, as we see him going after people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. So there's no guarantee we'll get Republican support, but they may view it differently now that we have a Democrat in the White House. They may want congressional subpoenas to be enforced, and they may want to make sure that the president can't abuse the Justice Department or profit from the Oval Office. So I'm hoping the calculation has changed for them, but time will tell.
I'm glad you mentioned the additional elements that are in this bill because, I go back far enough that I can remember when norms were just accepted and we never thought anyone would violate them. And you mentioned emoluments, which is one of the many, many things where whoever thought you would need to pass a law that said, here's how we enforce that clause? It was just assumed that people would follow it. But now that we know the substance of this very important bill, and particularly maybe even the subpoenas, as now subpoenas have been issued to 4 more members of the former Trump administration. And the question I get the most commonly on Twitter nowadays is, how is Congress going to enforce those subpoenas? So I'm very glad that this bill is pending, hopeful that it'll pass. But that's the question. How likely is it to pass right now?
Well, we will certainly get it through the House, and the plan is to take it up this fall. The question is whether we can get Republican support, which will be helpful when we get to the Senate. We are discussing strategy in the Senate, whether to bring it up as a complete package or bring it up piecemeal. I just want to get it done. We're taking it one step at a time. But you're absolutely right. There were certain things that we never expected we'd have to put into law. But if you look at just one example, you see just the shattering of these norms. And it's the former President Trump's promise to build a wall and to get Mexico to pay for it. And of course, that was a bogus promise to begin with. Mexico was never going to pay for it, and it's a bad idea. But nonetheless, when he failed to get Congress to go along with it, he did an end run around Congress and tried to get the military to pay for it, or to pay for it out of the defense budget. And when that wasn't really successful, some of his closest advisors, like Steve Bannon, set up a nonprofit to ask people to donate money to build the wall. And then they ripped off the money.
Yeah.
And when they ripped off the money from Trump's own supporters, and Bannon was indicted for it, what does Donald Trump do? He pardons him. It's just a group of grifters. And the fact that could take place is just mind-boggling, but clearly that they could do it and do it with impunity. The president's cohorts could get away with this kind of criminal activity and just get pardoned for it. It tells us how much we need to put these norms into law and give them the force and effect of law.
Listening to you made me laugh as I was listening to these list of horrible things. And I mean, I don't know what else to do, because otherwise I'm going to cry and be depressed. It is totally like science fiction that this could be happening in America. I mean, we're talking about Republicans refusing to do anything to support the basic fundamentals of our democracy. And, is there any chance that there'll be any breakaway Republicans that will support this? I mean, maybe Cheney and our own Congressman Kinzinger from Illinois. Is there any hope? What can be done to get people to support what I would consider the very fundamentals of democracy?
Well, I'm encouraged that Republicans around the country are supportive, but it's a sign of the times that Republicans in Washington don't support what Republicans around the country advocate for when it comes to good government and democracy. We have now 150 organizations, good government organizations around the country who have endorsed the bill. And they span the ideological spectrum from the very liberal to the very conservative. Mm-hmm. And I hope that has some influence on Republicans here in Congress. Some have announced they're retiring rather than have to deal with, what it's like in the GOP right now. And they may provide some of the help to get this passed. But it's a terrible tragedy that so many of the Republican members are unwilling to do their constitutional duty, will not protect their own institution, their own body where they serve, because they're in such fear of what the president can do in terms of their future. I don't understand why people are here if they're not willing to do the right thing, regardless of the cost.
So, as you said, if the bill passes the House, it would proceed to the Senate, which needs at least 60 votes in order to pass. That's no small feat, even for something not threatened to former President Trump. I'm wondering what you think of getting rid of the filibuster, or if we should do a carve-out for this particular bill and other democracy reform kind of bills.
I'm completely supportive of doing away with the filibuster. I would rather have U.S. policy move in dramatically different directions depending on who's in the majority than have it not move at all, than have just stagnation and gridlock. The governing party should be given a chance to govern. And the Senate is already an anti-majoritarian institution. 23% of Americans control 60% of the votes just because of the distribution of the states. And so it's a very strongly anti-popular will institution as it is. The filibuster just makes it more so. So I think it ought to be done away with. But I certainly think in the case of voting rights and pro-democracy reforms, there ought to be carve-outs. But if I were going to prioritize among the carve-outs, I would put H.R. 1 first, because voting is foundational to our democracy. And if you don't have that foundation, then nothing that it rests upon is going to stand.
In favor of getting rid of the filibuster that I have heard. You phrased it beautifully, and I really hope that it comes to pass, because I agree with you. Gridlock is worse than having swings based on who wins the election. And so thank you very much for that. We are very grateful for your time. And we have a lot more questions. So if you have time, we'll keep going. If not, we will have you back again so that we can ask more questions about pending legislation and climate change and immigration and DACA, infrastructure, whether even that can pass with progressives and moderates fighting.
You'll have to have me back. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I hear the votes buzzing, but great pleasure to be with you again, and look forward to our next opportunity.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Congressman
much.
Schiff. We are grateful to you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Victor, I absolutely loved our conversation with Congressman Schiff, and particularly his very succinct and clear statement about the filibuster and why the tyranny of the minority that it enables is not worth continuing it. So that was good news. But even better news is that after a year of being in college online from your bedroom in Illinois, you are now actually on campus at UCLA, and yesterday was the start of classes. So you're now having your very first in-person classes and meeting your classmates. And I want to relive my college days by listening to you describe what it's been like to be in college.
It's been such a thrill. It's been long overdue, but every single person I've talked to on campus, there's like one unifying theme that unites all of us. And it's like we all missed just the first year of college, and it's so great to be back. And so we've had our kind of welcome week. This is what they consider week 0, which is like the week before classes start. And it's just primarily people meeting each other, meeting new people, connecting with old friends, meeting new ones, looking at campus, going beyond campus, exploring the Westwood Village. But it's been such a refreshing and amazing experience, especially after a year of online learning. And I think today is my first day, as we're recording, it's on Friday. Today is my first day of real classes, so we'll see how this big lecture goes, but it'll definitely be a little bit strange, but exciting to be back in a classroom. And I'm just hoping to it's a big auditorium, so I'm hoping to meet people in front of me, behind me, to the side of me. And so really looking forward to this college experience. But I don't know, for our audience out there, I know we have some college students, high school students, maybe some people who are thinking about going to college. Jill, I'm wondering if you have any advice for them as they approach college, if they're a freshman or I guess sophomore like me who hasn't experienced college their first year. What would you say to them after experiencing college yourself?
Well, I'm not letting you get away with not answering more questions, so I'll answer your question,
Okay.
But then I have many more for you. I mean, college is the best learning and growth experience that you can ever have. It's exponential compared to any other time in your life. For many people, it's your first time really away from home and on your own and living independently. And as you said, meeting people from way outside your own neighborhood and your own experiences. And I think it's just an exciting, wonderful opportunity. I loved being a liberal arts student in my first 2 years and just being able to explore Russian literature and French language and whatever I felt like before going into the Journal School in my junior year and really, focusing on my major. So enjoy all the classes, enjoy the new friends. They will be your lifetime friends. I still see my college friends, and I graduated college in 1968. So I still want to relive my experiences with you and, talk to you more about the classes that you will be taking and how you feel about the new people you've met. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm currently majoring in American literature and culture, which is kind of a section of the English department. But so I'm taking 2 English classes, one on American culture and literature, and then the other is just a general education requirement. And then the other one is a poli-sci class, which is, they call it politics and strategy. I have received emails from all of the professors, so it feels like it's official. I've received the syllabus, which I know is really important. It lays out all of the assignments that's due. And in terms of just the people I've met so far, it's just extraordinary to meet people from all across really the world. I met someone from Lebanon, and we were talking about their food and culture, and it's just like you don't get to go to Lebanon or go to these countries, but it's cool to meet someone from those different places and be able to see things from their perspective and understand how they live and see the world. And I think that's what makes meeting new people so thrilling and such a great experience. And definitely one of the highlights so far before classes have started, just meeting people across the world and getting to learn more about how they view and see the world.
The international students at Illinois, when I was there, were really a way to open the world to me, because back then, honestly, world travel wasn't what it is now. And so I didn't go to Europe until I was between my junior and senior year as my first trip. And that was a big deal. But I was prepared because I had met people from all around the world. So it's great that you're meeting people, and I know you're going to enjoy your classes, and you'll have some memorable professors. It'll be interesting. Have you met any of the professors you had online yet?
So I'm actually meeting with them next week. I emailed 2 of them. I wasn't able to form any meaningful relationship, but I thought I'd reach out and just say, like, it'd be nice to see you in person finally, and not on Zoom. But I'm excited to meet them and hopefully meet more professors, more students, just everyone on campus.
Great. And during your introduction week, did you get to look at various activities on campus? Sometimes that's part of what they do in orientation week. And have you signed up for some activities? I bet you have.
So there was this thing called the Enormous Activities Fair. So it was all of the clubs basically just gather on what we call like the Jan steps. So it's like a big lawn, and so everyone can go there. It's kind of like science fair, but like all the clubs line up and propose they have like cardboard cutouts, and it's very science fair like. But I am interested in a few clubs: student government, one of them, the journalism club, which is called our student newspaper, the Daily Bruin, and then a few other maybe just cultural clubs. But it was really overwhelming. Like I was like, I want to join this club and that club, but I won't have time, so I'm gonna narrow it down. But I've about 4 or 5 in the mix.
Well, we know that you've had some op-eds published and wrote an article for the Better Government Association. So maybe the journalism club is a good place, or the student newspaper. I was on the Daily Illini and got great experience doing that. That has helped me in my legal career as well as my current more journalistic career. So good luck to you. And obviously for those listeners who don't know, Victor and I talk not just about the show, we frequently chat. So I know you'll keep me informed on your teachers and your roommates and new friends, and enjoy.
And if you are a college student, you should let us know how your experience has been so far too. I know all across the nation, last year some schools were in person, some schools weren't. So this is definitely a time for us all to be back on campus and enjoy, I think, what college has to offer. And what Jill said is really a transformational and amazing opportunity.
And let us know what your campus is doing about COVID, how they're dealing with it. Are they requiring that you be vaccinated? Are you required to, and Victor, you too, are you required in lecture halls to be masked?
Yes, fully masked. We had to do. We aren't doing weekly testing, which I'm not so sure about. But we did do 2 tests at the beginning of the week, and then we were required to get vaccinated. So we have those measures in place. But
Yeah.
I know there can probably be more done. But masks are, I think, right now an important tool for wherever we are, outside, inside.
Excellent. As I said, have a great first week.
Thank you. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of iGen Politics with Congressman Schiff as much as Jill and I did. And we will see you next week. But in the meantime, feel free to follow us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube.